Hi, I'm Imi. I'm the author of Mapping the Human Mind, a philosophical journey through time, thought, and consciousness. I'll be reading it one chapter at a time. This is Chapter 2, The Dawn of Ritual, Movement Towards Memory. In 2013, archaeologists Rick Hunter and Stephen Tucker found themselves crawling through the narrow, pitch-black chambers of South Africa's Rising Star Cave. The air was thick, the space claustrophobic, and the rock walls pressed in with every movement. Their headlamps flickered over bones, not scattered randomly, but carefully placed deep inside the cave. And these weren't just any bones. They didn't belong to early Homo sapiens. They belonged to something else, something unexpected. These were the remains of Homo naledi, a small-brained hominin species that, according to prevailing theories, shouldn't have been capable of anything resembling complex behaviour. And yet, here the bones were, deliberately deposited in hidden, hard-to-reach spaces. The implications were profound. Homo naledi lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, but their treatment of the dead suggests symbolic thought, perhaps even reverence. Recent evidence of fire in these deep chambers adds another layer. It wasn't just intentional burial. It was navigation, illumination, and possibly ritual activity in spaces entirely removed from daily life. If so, the roots of belief stretch far deeper into our evolutionary past than we previously imagined. This discovery didn't merely upend archaeological assumptions. It revealed something more fundamental, a shared psychological trait, the ability to assign meaning beyond immediate survival. Burial here meant more than disposal. It meant intention, remembrance, perhaps even the spark of early spirituality. So far from being a Homo sapiens invention, ritual may have emerged earlier, shared among our hominin cousins. In the flickering light of Rising Star Cave, we glimpse the earliest signs of a mind reaching for meaning. Burial rituals, a universal connection. The discoveries at Rising Star Cave hint at the possibility that ritual behaviour predates Homo sapiens entirely. But even within our own species, the instinct to mark death with meaning appears everywhere we look. Across time and continents, burial practices reflect a shared drive to honour the dead through deliberate, symbolic action. Though separated by oceans and millennia, cultures worldwide turn to remarkably similar expressions of belief. Death was not simply an end, it was a passage, one our ancestors marked with care, ceremony, and intent long before monumental temples were built. In the Neolithic settlement of Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, dating back nearly 9,000 years, the dead were buried directly beneath the floors of family homes. Bodies were carefully arranged, painted with ochre, and sometimes exhumed months or years later. Skulls were occasionally removed, treated with additional ochre, and either reburied or kept within living spaces. This practice suggests an ongoing relationship with the deceased, not a single act of disposal, but a continuing dialogue. The physical handling of ancestral remains created a tangible connection to the past, binding communities through shared ritual action. In early dynastic Egypt, burials evolved from simple pit graves to elaborate tombs, reflecting an expanding cosmology. The earliest Egyptian burials placed bodies in a circular fetal position, mimicking the shape of the womb, a deliberate expression of hope for renewal. As Egyptian civilization developed, funerary practices grew more complex. Bodies were wrapped, protected, and surrounded by objects deemed necessary for the journey ahead. The preservation of the body reflected a belief that physical form remained important after death, that identity persisted in material remains. The same idea echoes in the megalithic tombs of Europe, where vast underground chambers housed multiple generations. The Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland demonstrates this profound connection between physical space and cosmic cycles. Built around 3200 BCE, its entrance is precisely aligned so that on the winter solstice, sunlight illuminates the central chamber for 17 minutes. This required not only astronomical knowledge, but also a belief system that valued such alignments, that saw meaning in the marriage of earth and sky, darkness and light, death and rebirth. The early civilizations of North America wove their cosmology into the earth itself. The Adena and Hopewell cultures built massive earthen mounds to house the dead and mark the land with spiritual significance. Their construction required coordinated effort from entire communities, moving thousands of cubic feet of earth by hand. This burial wasn't simply about laying the dead to rest, it was a collective act of ritual labour that shaped the community itself, a physical expression of collective belief that reshaped the landscape. What makes these findings remarkable is their striking similarity across isolated cultures. From Melanesia to Mesoamerica, from Africa to the Arctic, burial practices consistently show careful arrangement, inclusion of symbolic objects, and often the use of red ochre. This vibrant, iron-rich mineral was applied to bodies, sprinkled in graves, and used in art worldwide. Its blood-like appearance may have symbolized life force, or its preservative properties may have reflected a desire to maintain the body's integrity. Its ubiquity suggests a shared understanding of its ritual power, a rare constant across varied human expressions of belief. Across these cultures, burial went far beyond disposal. It was a sacred act of connection, a way to maintain balance in an unpredictable world. The placement of these sites, the precision of their structures, and the care taken in these final acts suggests something far more profound than mere tradition. Emerging status and social hierarchy. As ritual practices evolved, something else was happening alongside them, the emergence of social hierarchy. What looked like hierarchy was belief, carved into status and sign. The archaeological record reveals a fascinating pattern. Across continents, around the same time period, roughly 10,000 to 5,000 BCE, we see the emergence of consistent physical markers. One particularly intriguing example is the depiction of elongated fingernails as a sign of elevated status. In Easter Island traditions, ancient oral histories describe leaders with long, carefully maintained nails, a physical sign that they were exempt from manual labour. Remarkably similar imagery appears on carvings at Göbekli Tepe and other ancient sites across Asia, suggesting a recurring human pattern. These emerging status markers reflect a profound shift in belief systems, from relatively egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies to more stratified communities where certain individuals claimed special connection to the divine. Status symbols weren't merely decorative, but reflected a deeper cosmological belief that social hierarchy mirrored divine order. Leaders were viewed as intermediaries between human and spirit worlds, their authority sanctioned by supernatural forces. These early markers of distinction laid the foundation for what would later evolve into divine kingship. Elaborate headdresses and distinctive garments appear in burials and artistic depictions worldwide. In Peru's Paracas culture, high-status individuals were laid to rest with intricate textiles and feathered headdresses. incorporating animal motifs that suggested supernatural connections. These textiles, with their vibrant colours and complex designs, represented thousands of hours of skilled labour, a physical investment that elevated certain individuals above others. The materials often came from distant regions, requiring extensive trade networks and emphasizing the exceptional nature of the wearer. Jade Kong tubes found in China's Liangzhu culture marked elite burials. These mysterious objects, squared on the outside, circular on the inside, may represent the ancient Chinese cosmological belief in a round heaven and square earth. Crafted from one of the hardest materials available, they connected the deceased to the fundamental structure of the universe. In Europe, gold ornaments and amber beads played a similar role. Amber, with its translucent glow, often travelled hundreds of miles from its Baltic source, its sunlight-like appearance possibly connecting the wearer to solar deities. Special tools or weapons accompany high-status burials across cultures. Intricately carved maces or staffs, too delicate for practical use but perfect as symbols of authority, appear in graves from Egypt to Melanesia. The Nama palette from pre-dynastic Egypt shows an early ruler wielding a ceremonial mace as a symbol of authority, a cross-cultural solution to making abstract power visible. Bodily modifications also marked status and identity. The practice of artificially elongating the skull by binding infants' heads appears independently in South America, Africa, and Asia. The Paraca skulls of Peru show cranial binding so extreme that it fundamentally altered head shape, a physical transformation marking certain individuals from birth as different, possibly closer to divine forms. That parents would subject their children to such permanent modification speaks to the power of the belief system, a conviction that these individuals were destined for distinct cosmic roles. And high-status individuals didn't just live differently, they experienced rituals differently. Special platforms, elevated seats, and restricted ceremonial spaces embodied a worldview where social hierarchy wasn't merely practical, it was cosmic. The royal graves of in Mesopotamia vividly illustrate this. Rulers buried with extraordinary wealth and, in some cases, sacrificed attendants positioned in their service roles, creating a microcosm of social order preserved for eternity. So why did similar status systems emerge independently across the globe? Is there something in human psychology that produces hierarchy once population or resource levels reach a tipping point? Or does the physical manifestation of status fulfill a deeper need, to make abstract power visible, to render social difference tangible and therefore real? The physical markers we uncover in the archaeological record offer more than insight into status. They reveal how belief systems began to shape, justify, and formalize social difference. These expressions of power and meaning weren't isolated. They set the stage for something larger, the construction of entire ritual landscapes. Göbekli Tepe, the first temple. You climb a hill in silence, dust rising around your feet as the horizon stretches wide beneath an ancient sky. At the summit, stone giants emerge from the earth, T-shaped pillars weathered but unbowed by time. They form circles as if gathering in eternal ceremony. Their surfaces are etched with creatures you recognize: foxes, boars, vultures, serpents, alongside symbols whose meanings are long forgotten, but whose presence still hums with intent. These stones stand like deliberate sentinels, arranged with care, carved with purpose. The animals and patterns speak of something beyond ornamentation. Were they maps, messages, maybe even prayers. As if, by setting them in sacred order, the builders were trying to make sense of the cosmos, to fix chaos into meaning, to inscribe the invisible into stone. You're standing on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey at a place now known as Göbekli Tepe. And what's most astonishing isn't just the scale or beauty, it's the age. 11,500 years old. This was before pottery, before agriculture, before humans even settled in one place, as far as we knew. When discovered, this site threw the entire archaeological world into chaos. The established narrative that humans only built monumental structures after developing agriculture and settling down suddenly crumbled. Radiocarbon dating placed Göbekli Tepe around 9,500 BCE when we were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers. Yet these people somehow dragged colossal stones, without domesticated animals, without wheels, into precise arrangements. Each T-shaped pillar weighs between 7 and 16 tons and stands up to 18 feet tall. Moving just one would have required dozens, if not hundreds of people working in coordination. The level of planning, craftsmanship and collaboration required is staggering. So the question echoes through time. Why? Göbekli Tepe represents a pivotal moment when belief transcended burial practices and cave paintings to become monumental architecture. It marked humanity's shift from sanctifying natural spaces to deliberately shaping belief at a grand scale, ritual etched into stone. The site itself features multiple circular enclosures, each containing T-shaped pillars arranged in rings with two larger sentinels at the centre. These pillars aren't just stone. Some show human-like elements with arms carved along their sides, suggesting they may represent ancestors or even supernatural beings. The circular pattern with paired central pillars facing the entrance appears consistently across multiple enclosures, a standardized ritual layout implying a shared understanding of how sacred space should be organized. A physical template for worship passed down and replicated over generations. One of the most revealing details is the absence of evidence for permanent settlement. People didn't live here, they gathered, drawn together by devotion. For the first time in human history, we see a clear demarcation between the sacred and mundane, a space designed exclusively for communing with something beyond the everyday. And the story doesn't just end with ritual alone. New findings suggest that small-scale habitation may have accompanied these sacred spaces, not permanent settlements, but traces of temporary life. And with that comes a provocative reversal of the old narrative. Perhaps it wasn't agriculture that gave rise to temples, but temples that gave rise to agriculture. The need to sustain gathering groups may have driven early experiments in planting and animal tending, not only out of necessity, but devotion. This hypothesis gains strength from the site's location at the northern edge of wild einkorn wheat's natural habitat, one of the first grains humans domesticated. Perhaps these regular ritual gatherings created conditions where selective harvesting and eventually deliberate planting began, ultimately giving birth to true agriculture. The ornate details on some pillars, elaborate belts, jewelry-like motifs, elongated fingernails, hint at complex ideas about identity, status, and cosmology. And remarkably, Göbekli Tepe isn't alone. Similar sites discovered nearby, Karahan Tepe, Navali Kori, suggest we're seeing just the visible peaks of a broader cultural awakening, an ancient constellation of sites where belief was carved into the bones of the earth. In the silent stones of Göbekli Tepe, we witness not just the dawn of monumental architecture, but the power of belief to physically reshape the world. These massive pillars stand as witnesses to an ancient truth. Humans have always been driven to express the intangible through the tangible, to give physical form to our most profound beliefs, even if it meant moving mountains, or at least massive stones, to do so. Embodied symbols, meaning in motion. Long before temples echoed with chants or sacred texts were etched into stone, meaning was made through movement. Across the ancient world, ritual wasn't confined to objects or symbols, it was enacted through the body. Walking, bowing, spiraling, and descending through specific spaces became a kind of language, a physical expression of belief that shaped not only sacred architecture, but the minds of those who moved through it. This is perhaps most vivid in ancient cave sites. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, many sacred caves were deliberately located in hard-to-reach chambers, accessible only by firelight and determined effort. These weren't casual shelters, they were pilgrimage spaces. The journey itself mattered. In France's Chavot Cave, visitors had to crawl and descend through twisting passages to reach the inner sanctum, where the oldest known cave paintings reside. At Lascaux, the famous Hall of Bulls lies deep within, requiring movement from light into darkness, from narrow tunnels into open space. These transitions, both physical and symbolic, likely shaped the entire ritual experience, preparing the mind for what lay ahead. This spatial choreography appears across cultures. In China's Zhonghuang caves, the path to meditation chambers was carefully structured to narrow the senses and quiet the mind, a physical transition mirroring the inward journey of meditation. In Mesoamerica, Mayan rituals descended into cenotes, natural sinkholes symbolizing portals to the underworld. At Newgrange in Ireland, the narrow entrance forces one to bow before entering the chamber that floods with solstice light only once a year. From the labyrinthine corridors of Egyptian tombs to the winding paths of Japanese Shinto shrines, from Native American spiral dances to the meditative pacing around sacred Hindu and Buddhist sites, movement was never incidental. It was intentional and meaningful. Even open-air sites followed this principle. The processional avenues of Avebury and Stonehenge guided participants along ritual paths aligned with celestial events. These were not just places to gather, but landscapes that shaped the gathering, through rhythm, direction, and embodied transition. This patterned movement, bending, walking, spiraling, descending, was symbolic action embedded into architecture itself. Ritual wasn't experienced only in the mind, but through the body in motion. Archaeologist Christopher Tilley calls this phenomenological archaeology, the study of how space was experienced bodily, not just seen. By retracing ancient footsteps, we begin to understand how ritual landscapes were designed to transform those who walked them. These choreographed journeys through space weren't just logistical, they were symbolic paths that mirrored internal transformation. These physical pathways would later evolve into fully immersive environments where light, sound, and structure worked together to produce collective experiences of transcendence. The physical manifestation of belief. The human urge to give form to the unseen shaped more than objects, it shaped worlds. A carved stone, a painted chamber, a body laid with care, each became a vessel for meaning, a way to carry belief beyond the moment it was felt. In turning thought into form, our ancestors were not simply expressing belief, they were preserving it. Physical rituals became reference points, grounding abstract ideas into shared experience. A sacred path could teach order, a burial could embody cosmology, a tool or mark could signal who belonged and who didn't. Eventually, these forms became more than expressions. They became foundations. stable enough to hold memory, identity, and meaning itself. Belief no longer lived only in minds or movements, it began to live in things, and soon those things would begin to speak. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Narrative.